Good morning and welcome to all of you. Welcome to the second webinar in the series that's hosted by the English Department of SSN College of Engineering, Chennai. We are happy to welcome you all on the behalf of the convener, Professor Thiruvenkatasamy, Head of the Department of English, and as coordinators, Dr. Cherry Matthew Philippos and myself to this webinar. It's a great occasion for us to be hosting this kind of a webinar, because not only is the pandemic a trigger for all of us to improve and use other means for professional development, it is also an opportunity for us to connect with people who it's difficult to connect in physical presence. So in that sense, it's a great opportunity for us that we are able to connect with people, with scholars, experts from across geographical boundaries. And in the second series, in the second webinar, we have with us an expert from Bangladesh. But before we go to that, I would request the convener of this webinar, the Head of Department of English, Professor Thiruvenkatasamy, to make his opening remarks. Sir, over to you.
Good morning. I'm very happy that English Department is hosting the second webinar, second international webinar. And we wholeheartedly welcome Dr. Mian Naushaad Kabir in our midst to share his views on the topic, choosing materials online, choosing materials while teaching online. All of us know that in this pandemic situation, where education is crippled all over the world, we were almost going in for a zero education during 2020 and 21. I'm not very sure about what would happen even in 21, 22. With these days of uncertainty and education becoming a issue of, again, it has also become an issue of uncertainties. We do not know what will happen to our students, what will happen to our educational system. At this crucial juncture, what has come to our aid is technology, online education. I'm sure in the last 6 months, we have made a headway in using online materials successfully from the kindergarten school level to the tertiary level of education, and students world across are receiving their education at their own place, in their homes, and education has been totally replaced by the online mode. As we come to a stage where online mode of education is the only way out for educating our people, I'm sure all of you would agree with me that materials play a very vital role. The hour to head together and rest the materials that will be effective to our students at different stages in their academic lives. First of all, our materials should be instructional, interesting, and interactive. In the absence of the direct contact, it should be interactive, and it should also be technology friendly. We might not be able to do everything that we did in our regular classrooms. We might be able to do much more than what we did in our classrooms. I think all these things are happening now, and we have an expert in this field, Dr. Naushaad Kabir from the University of Dhaka, to share his views on this. I'm sure that this deliberation will be very useful for us in our own practice as an online educator. With these few words, I'm very happy once again to welcome in our midst, on behalf of the Department of English at SSN Engineering. We are very happy to welcome Dr. Mian Muhammad Naushaad Kabir and share his views on the topic choosing materials while teaching online. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was sir's uh, touch set the tone very precisely for today's webinar. The context of the online teaching models, and also the need for materials which we need to suddenly source online and so on. Without much ado, let me introduce to you Dr. Mia Muhammad Naushaad Kabir. Naushaad Kabir, Dr. Kabir is an assistant professor at the Department of English Language in the Institute of Modern Languages of the University of Dhaka. He's also the vice president of BELTA, which is the Bangladesh English Language Teachers Association. And he's also the founding executive editor of the BELTA Journal. He pursued his PhD from the EFLU, that's where we met in Hyderabad, on a SARC scholarship which was offered by the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, ICCR. His areas of interest include curriculum and materials evaluation, testing and assessment, multilingualism and multiculturalism, ecolinguistics, and also translingualism. He is also the co-editor of the forthcoming Routledge publication called the Routledge Handbook of English Language Education in Bangladesh. Dr. Naushaad is an extremely active teacher professional. He is, as you can see, that he is vice president of the Teachers Association in Bangladesh. He takes keen interest in building networks and sharing expertise. So, I warmly welcome Dr. Mia Muhammad Naushaad Kabir to join us and to present to us his views on choosing materials when we teach online. Over to Dr. Mia Muhammad Naushaad Kabir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. And also thank you to my friend, Dr. Deepesh, and also Dr. Cherry. Both of them are my friends. A very warm welcome from Dhaka, Dhaka University, and from me. Yes, I think Professor Thiru has already given the context of the topic which I'm going to talk about. It's not that we didn't use online materials before, but during this emergency situation, we understood its importance more significantly and seriously than ever. So I will directly go into the slides. I think I'm audible, and also let me know if you can see the screen. Yeah, so is it okay?
Yes, yes, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So in today's talk, I'm actually going to share some of my readings on this in this topic, and also my experiences of taking classes online, and then going to make a connection between what I read and what I have been doing, and the implication of my understanding for my colleagues in Bangladesh, India, and other surrounding contexts. So I will be my talk can be divided into 5 sections, and I will roughly follow the outline. So I would like to begin or clarify my position in relation to today's talk. First of all, let's say I'm not going to talk about those teachers and those learners who are in a privileged situation. Uh, my talk will have more relevance and pertinence for teachers and learners who are actually engaged in a low resource context. And by low resource context, I mean those contexts where the teachers and the learners are underprivileged, or you can say less privileged. Uh, they are often from the marginalized class, basically in terms of financial and technological and other socio-cultural aspects. So, because you are already familiar with the term digital divide and then technological affordances, and we know that yes, many people actually do not have that sort of affordance, and they're marginalized by the digital divide, chiefly for their financial and technological kind of restrictions, or the impediments that they have, that they're facing. Uh, I think this talk will have some sort of relevance for those who are already into teaching, who wish to be teachers, and of course the senior teachers who can also relate to my experiences, and maybe later on we can listen to their experiences through question answer sessions or through their presentations in some other platforms. Uh, so, if you look at my the title of today's presentation, I would like to define the title in a systematic manner. So, choosing materials while teaching online. So, what we mean by choosing? I mean, so if I look at this word from the uh, academic perspective or the technical perspective of materials development or evaluation, choosing entails actually that kind of situation where teachers have the choice of selecting their own materials from the available resources. But as you know, that in many contexts, teachers don't have that kind of choice. The books and other resources are prescribed by the boards or the universities. So there is a fixed uh, textbook, and teachers and students have to use that book in the classroom. But if there is flexibility about this thing, then teachers can choose materials. Sometimes learners can also come with their preferences, and there can be negotiations. So by choosing, I actually mean the power to select among the available resources. By materials, I mean anything, whether it is prescribed by the board or whether you are choosing uh, depending on your necessity to teach the learners. So anything that we actually use in the classroom to teach language or any other subject can be called teaching and learning materials. Why is a tricky term here in this case? Because why actually entails the fleeting moments. I mean, for example, I am talking now, but uh, you understand that before this talk, there has been a lot of preparation and a lot of reading. We have spent a lot of time to arrange this session. So while actually includes uh, the pre-stage, and sometimes it also includes the post stage, because we often try to imply something that, for example, if you listen to my talk, you might have some sort of understanding of how you are going to choose materials. So the benefit will take place in the future, but that has its root in this talk now. So I mean, I want to imply that while includes both the pre and post stages. So it means that even though I'm saying choosing materials while teaching online, you understand that I'm actually meaning the entire process, which began before coming into the classroom, and which continued during the classroom, and which will have some outcome even after the classroom. And finally, by teaching online means we are teaching in some sort of modality where the learners and the teachers are not in the same room. They are in different locations. Sometimes even they can be in different time zones, but the teaching is happening. For example, now we are in different time zones, so I'm half an hour little advanced than the Indian Standard Time. So it is now around I get in Bangladesh. It's now 10:46. I mean a quarter to 11. But in India it is just quarter past 10. Um, well, so this is how I'm going to look at today's talk from the this technical perspective. This is how I define these terms used in my title. Before and I go to the online aspects, it is important that I talk about some criteria which developed uh, while there was discussion about choosing materials in face-to-face classes for face-to-face classes, because the entire thing started with face-to-face modality. Online platforms came later, and this is the difference is just in the modality, but the purpose or the aim is same. That is, to teach students or for the students to learn from the classroom. So definitely there will be many things overlapping between the offline and online materials that we use in the classrooms. Uh, the differences that will come in online modality will be discussed a little later once I give you some very quick and some basic ideas about the criteria regarding the selection of materials. So I think it's quite an old field, the field of materials evaluation, and uh, people have been systematically studying this field and contributing to this field for around last 50 years, since 70s, 1970s. So I'm going to talk and discuss talk about and discuss some of the popular and well established criteria offered by different applied linguists and material developers. For example, Eagle Wright, who actually talked about these four things. I mean, the goal, content, method, and guidance. So, if you are using something in the classroom, uh, you should check if the goal, and the content, and the method. That means how you are going to teach that thing in the classroom, and the guidance, the directives for the students. They actually match with your curriculum and syllabus. This is one way of looking at it. But again, you can look at from another perspective, and in fact there are lots of perspectives of looking at the issue. Let's say Dubin and Olstein talked about integration of grammar and notion, themes and topics, and then communicative and socio-cultural functions. And you can understand very well that all these ideas came after communicative approach became popular worldwide. Much later, Fred Chambers, included the pedagogical factors into his understanding of materials, and he mentioned whether the materials are suitable for the particular age group, whether they are culturally appropriate, whether the methodology is suitable for them, if a particular textbook has a teacher's book to guide the teachers about how to teach. He also talked about the variety of activities, the pace, whether it is too fast or too slow, or it is going with the pace of the learner's natural route of development, and also the personal involvement. I mean, the scope for learners' involvement with the teaching materials. Now, Chambers was talking about textbooks, but we are actually talking about the materials that we as teachers choose. So you understand that in such cases we are not supposed to have teacher's book. But even then, in some of the websites, we often find that there is a section where they actually guide us how to use the materials with their students, something like that. Uh, the criteria are being repeated by different scholars. Okay, so they have been repeating the ideas, but at the same time they have been contributing to the ideas. Let's say Rabdi includes the pedagogical validity, but at the same time she includes the psychological validity and process and content validity into consideration, and the psychological aspect of the materials. Based on which we can say whether the materials are matching with the learner's level or not. And then John Shave, actually directly talks about its relevance with the syllabus, methodology, and context of learning, and the background of learning. McGrath talked about linguistic items and also the non-linguistic issues. So linguistic items, you understand those grammatical things and the functional things, notional things, whereas the non-linguistic things can be the pedagogical things or sometimes the technical aspects of the materials, like the size of the page, the color, the quality of the page, even the cost of the page, etc. So just to remind you that we are talking about the offline materials, I mean the print materials. This one is a very important checklist proposed by Koningsberg, and it has been used by numerous researchers across the world to evaluate their materials. Uh, the criteria that we use to evaluate materials are actually the criteria which can be used in selecting materials or even in developing materials. So we are just using the same criteria from different perspectives depending on our purpose. So Connect's work, mentions these things from aims, design, language content, till methodology, teachers' books, and practical considerations, which mean the implementation aspect of the materials in the class. Okay, whether teacher finds it comfortable to use, whether it is comfortable for the learners as well. Jackson Richards also talk about some factors while evaluating the materials, and he mentions program factors, teachers factors, learners factors, content and pedagogical factors. So you understand. I mean, the terms are self-explanatory, and you can understand that if I go to the last slide, you can understand that all these categories can easily fit into Richard's list of factors. It is just the different terms, but the ideas are almost similar. Jeremy Hammer also presents another checklist where he talks about the price, availability, the layout and design, which is extremely important. Let's say, for example, when you are writing or selecting materials for the children, it is important that your materials have a lot of pictures on it because children are more attracted to pictures. But when we are choosing materials for the adult learners, most of the time we have some graphs or charts, and most of the pages are filled up with language. So this is about the layout and design thing. So Harmer also talks about stereotyping, that is an issue related to the content. So there is sometimes the stereotyping representation of certain issues. For example, we often find that the representation of women are gendered in the textbooks, and the conscious materials writers actually write uh, giving women more importance in their content selection or in their representation of the materials. Uh, this is just a scanned copy, you understand. This is Sheldon's list of criteria. I'm sorry if the print quality or the visual is not up to the mark, but this is what I could do maximum. So in Sheldon's criteria, you can see the factors include the rationale of choosing materials, the availability, then says the user definition, accessibility, linkage, and the selection and grading, physical characteristics. So you can understand that some of these criteria can be in fact applied to the online materials, which might include PDF, PPT, websites, or some other ways, for example, blogs or FB post, I mean Facebook post, they can also be used as materials. But you need to understand whether those materials actually conform to these principles. And there will be some more principles, which I will talk a little later. I'm showing you another criteria. There is Penhu's list of criteria. So this is about the course book assessment, but some of them will apply to our to the assessment of the online materials. So you see, Penny who has actually tried to include almost all the possible skills. For example, you can see somewhere in the middle, pronunciation, explanation, and practice, then vocabulary explanation and practice, then grammar presentation and practice. Again, fluence practice in all four skills. So we understand that she actually looks at material from the integrated perspectives, where we do not teach one skill in a singular manner, but we teach skills in an integrative manner. Okay. And she is also talking about audio cassettes because it is 1999, and you know very well that cassettes were very popular at the time. Okay. We didn't have CDs or MP3s like we have now. Uh, I will go to now the online issues where some you know different sets of criteria will be mentioned. But the criteria that we talked about with reference to the offline or print materials will still have their relevance. So, in a particular study by the Polish applied linguist Mojesko and Krachka, uh, they actually surveyed literature, and they found that these elements, you can see in the first bullet. So, the program or curriculum, the layout or attractiveness, skills, practice, activities, teachers' books, and practical concerns are mentioned by the scholars uh, in the parentheses. So these issues are pretty common while we are evaluating materials offline, but they kind of connected these things to their assessment of online materials as well, and then they added to all these criteria technical criteria and multimedia specific criteria, because you know that the online materials involves technical know-how, and most often the online materials also involves uh, the multimedia aspects. So it has sounds and it has colorful visuals, whereas in contrast, most of the printed materials are in black and white. The children's ones are exceptions. But if you look at any website, you will hardly find any black and white websites. They have numerous colors, and they also have access to different kinds of sounds and other ways of representations. They also developed a framework, and in their framework, they actually proposed four categories. So one is program level criteria, that is features and interface between the system and human beings. Then the criteria for the content, and then the methodology, And finally, language skills and subsystems, which we have been talking about all this while. So the first three criteria are addition to the last one when we are moving from offline to our online modality. Um, Up to this moment, if my talk sounds little technical, I apologize for that because actually we are dealing with the technical aspect, and the field of materials development is actually technical. But I will try to bring it down to more commonsensical phraseology so that uh, or those who do not have any previous idea can relate my discussion to their practices. This is just one extract from the framework by Mojesco and Krachka. Uh, so you see the program level criteria. So it is the features and interface. Let me read out because I know the visuals might not be very much reader friendly. I will read out two or three questions from the first subheading. Is the level of language in the program that the program offers clearly indicated? Is it easy to start the program? They actually mean the app or the website. Is the user interface easy to understand? For example, the screen layout clear? Is the screen layout clear or easy to interpret? Is it easy to navigate through the program? Are icons that are used to assist navigation, for example, back to the home page, exit, clear and intelligible? So this is how they are looking at the website. Then some more questions on the content and methodology, which I am skipping. I will mention some more frameworks for evaluating the online resources around us. One is by Brooke, who actually talked about evaluating electronic listening materials, but you will see that some of the criteria mentioned by Brooke has relevance for other sort of materials as well. So Brooke basically talked about the appearance, okay, design and illustration, and he's concerned about the attractiveness, the objectives, also the topic content. Then he goes to his listening thing. I mean, the listening content, the multimedia content, and the language content. So let's move. It continues to the social and cultural context, language skills, then the teachability and flexibility. These are the pedagogical aspects of choosing materials online. Finally, practice and testing. So practice for confirming whether they have understood or eliciting their responses, and testing, a part of online assessment or continuous assessment. So this is not the summative one. It actually means the formative one. This is another very popular framework by Tony Bettis, who used this acronym ACTIONS for choosing materials online. So where A means access, whether the materials that you are using with your learners are accessible to them, whether they are free or you have to buy them. This is cost. Then the teaching and learning issues, also interactivity and user friendliness. There are some organizational issues. For example, whether your institute allow you to use certain kinds of materials or websites or not, whether they are new, so novelty, and finally the speed. I mean, speed means whether you can browse them or you can download them in regular speed offered by internet. So speed is a serious issue when you are using online modality, and it will be mentioned by many other applied linguists later on. So Derivanka also talks about the technical aspects, of, of the materials available online. So including download time and changes in the hardware, and then the technological aspect. So rapid changes happening around the practical aspect, like the cost, the availability of computer labs, or for example, sometimes the teachers' computer literacy. Finally, the ideological aspect, including the power, authority, and identity and access. So you can also, all these things actually lead to agency. For example, in the beginning, I made it clear that what I mean by choosing. Now, choosing means whether you have the power to choose or not. Or, for example, you have been told to use certain materials by your institute or by your government, by the educational boards. In many contexts, uh, governments actually uh, have some sort of websites, and they instruct their teachers to use those websites while teaching learners online. In Bangladesh, government actually started broadcasting classes in the national television known as BTV, Bangladesh Television. And in Bangladesh Television, they broadcast the subject and class specific lessons every day uh, in a certain scheduled slot, and students can watch them. But they have to be before television at that time. So Goine also talked about these 9 conditions for learning. This is a very famous, 9 events or 9 conditions of learning. Goine was not referring to the online modality, but this framework basically can be used uh, to both online and offline materials. So, I mean, the list was updated. It was first proposed in 1965, and it had only 6 criteria. But later on, in 2005, Goene et al. Actually updated and offered these 9 events. So your materials should gain attention of the learners. They must inform the learner of the objectives. So they must stimulate recall of prior learning. I mean, what the learner know. So the teacher must connect their previous knowledge to the new topic. The materials must present the stimulus so that the learners can be engaged. They must provide the learning guidance. They must elicit the performance. The materials also must provide feedback. So it's not that the teacher will provide feedback, the materials will have that feature as well, in the form of answer key or some sort of discussion or explanation of the exercises. There can be some assessment or on those assessment issue or aspect on those materials. And finally, the material should enhance the retention and transfer so that the learning can become permanent among the learners. So these are the 9 events, and they can pretty well be connected while we are trying to choose online materials from around. So Banville also talked about some other criteria. So what he said that when we choose materials from online resources, we must ensure that these materials can be recycled. I mean, we can use them more than once. It promotes human and human interaction, not only the system and human interaction. The learners can have varieties, and they have the power to choose so that they don't get bored and become monotonous. The materials must be learner centered, not the teacher centered or the system centered. And it must, let's say, maximize pair work leading to interaction. There will be a scope for self-study skill and improving classroom dynamics. So, some sort of guidance for both the learners and the teachers. The skills should be integrated, particular philosophy of looking at language. Not many people will agree with that. Ample exposure to meaningful language, meaningful, not only the structures of language, but how the structure works in a particular situation. And then you can understand whether the materials are relevant and interesting for the learners and the appropriate socially and culturally, whether they are authentic and pedagogically sound. You have to be also careful about the length of the material so that it matches with the duration of the class. So these are some of the criteria that we can keep in mind when we are choosing some materials for taking online classes. Uh, Arcadio adds some more, items to the list. So I will only read the highlighted things. One is the comprehensibility in terms of the visual support, clarity of picture, sound, and density of language. For example, my this slide of mine is quite dense, and then I showed you one or two screenshots where the quality was not very good in terms of clarity of picture. So they can be considered rather weak slides in today's presentation. Factors affecting the flexibility of use. So you see watchability. So for example, if you miss my session, what will you do? Are you going to miss it forever? Or it will be available in YouTube or in some other places so that you can later on come back and watch something like that. There is also the question of audio video delivery involving technical issues. For example, whether you can download a particular kind of file or you can uh, stream, you can use the streaming mode. You also have the issues with the bandwidth. So as I was stating, speed. Okay. And the similar kind of issue is about buffering and sometimes the file formats. Not every format supports every browser or every system. The materials must be able to draw attention of the learners. Okay. So these are some of the criteria that Arcadio talks about. Tomlinson and Mashuhara, in their very recent work in 2018, actually adds to their list. So they have been working in the field of materials development for a long period of time, for around 40 years. So they already talked about the linguistic and task authenticity and modality. But when the online issues came, so they added the issue of text, visuals, sound, and their effects on learners. So they also talked about the interaction between the materials and the users, and for them, it was more important to ensure quality interaction between the materials and the learners than by the quality of the materials only. So they also took into consideration the affective elements. For example, technophobia or shyness. Many people are shy of using technology. They are not motivated. Or sometimes in Zoom classes, you have mentioned that it is very difficult to make learners talk or learners write. Maybe they think that if I write something, everyone will see. But in face-to-face modality, I write something and submit to my teachers. Only the teacher can see, others cannot see. So something like that. So there are many effective elements in online modality, and Tomlinson and Masuhara actually includes them. And finally, there is the outcome evaluation. By doing all these things, I mean, choosing materials and choosing online platforms, what is actually happening? Are the learners learning, or how far have they learned? So we need to take that into account. So in the same article, Tomlinson and Masuhara also mentioned the requirements. I mean, this is important because the requirements will lead to the affordances or the digital divide issue that I mentioned in the beginning. Uh, so someone please also tell me if I'm within time or how much time I'm left with. Okay, so let's say
No problem, Naushaad. You can go ahead.
okay, fine, fine. So I mean our requirements to be digitally equipped will include first of all financial resources, then the hardware, also the network, good network. So sometimes you have, the first two conditions fulfilled, but you are in such a location where you don't have smooth network connections. So the applications or software issue, well, you must have digital literacy, technical support, and also a digital community. If you are the one and only person who has the know-how about the digital literacy thing, it's not going to give you the ultimate benefit you unless the people surrounding you are into it. So to let's say to this list, I would like to add also the mindset of the people. So I mean, many people and many students and many teachers actually have all these things, but they are not willing to be active online. So maybe they have those affective factors. Maybe they are shy, or they have some sort of phobia, something like that. So it is very difficult to change the mindset. So this is one area where I would like to highlight, or I'd like to focus on. And I would also request you to think on this mindset of the people around you. I mean, both the students and the colleagues in the department and around. So my the fourth issue is online modality. So I have talked about the criteria for choosing materials, both offline and online. But now I will talk about some benefits and some challenges when we are actually using materials online. Let's not think that after this COVID situation is gone, we are not going to use online materials at all. I think this is never going to happen, and the situation is not going to be the same after COVID, because we have already developed some sort of digital skill, and we will use this skill when normalcy comes back. We are not going to leave it unused. So this is one of my arguments. So the benefit of taking online classes or using online modality is so many. For example, online materials include digital literacy, no doubt about that. But what does digital literacy require? Now you see, digital literacy requires learners to work with messages, illustrations, videos, recorded audios, etc. And who are our learners? What do they do? So you see, our learners are quite technologically advanced. Even though as a teacher, some of us may not be, but no doubt about the learners. They blog, they Facebook, they also text and they WhatsApp. So they practice reading in all these platforms, like in blogs, FB or Facebooks, Twitter, newspapers, while they're discussing showbiz and sports, etc. They practice their listening skill when they listen to news, sports commentary, documentary films, songs, TikTok. They also practice speaking when they make online calls, voice SMS. They recite poems, they sing, they do video chats, and we cannot avoid them, we cannot ignore them. This is actually what is happening around us. But when we teach these learners using printed materials in offline classes, we actually do not include all these activities that they are doing. I mean, these are the 21st century skills which the learners have acquired on their own. But unfortunately, many of us, many teachers, fail to address or include the 21st century schools into their classroom, or take the classroom to enhance their 21st century skills, or you can say to smoothen these skills. So there is again a kind of divide. I mean, what we do inside the classroom uh, doesn't match with what the learners do outside the classroom. But when you take online classes using online materials, you have actually a lot of opportunities to include what they are doing outside to what they are going to study. So education suddenly becomes more relevant and closer to their heart. So these are definitely some benefits that online materials might offer. Uh, Also, our learners use you know some Zoom, Google Meet, or Microsoft Teams, all these platforms nowadays in the classrooms, and here they also go for the collaborative activities. The materials offer authenticity in terms of the multi-modality, including colorful visuals, sounds, authentic sounds, and then the graphs, animations, and other sorts of videos. Uh, Learners have, 24-hour access to all these materials. Even in some institutes, actually instruct teachers to keep the records of their classes so that if some learners miss the class, they can see the class later on and get the message. Using cloud computing devices, sometimes the learners can access those materials later on when they find their own time. Suddenly, our world of black and white academia, you know, is changed to a colorful world when we started taking online classes. And because this world is more colorful, this is more attractive, and this world is more engaging. And I think learners are kind of drawn to this world. So the only thing that we need to do is we have to be careful and cautious that how we're going about it. And most of the textbooks are silent. I mean, you read on your own. But now in online materials, there is a shift from the silent phase to the talky phase. I deliberately used these two terms when I was thinking about the silent movie and the talkies. Now I will come to some of the challenges of online materials. So, as I said, and this list is from Mudra, an Indonesian applied linguist, who very recently published this article in 2020, I think in March. Oh, by the way, I actually didn't give any citation or full citation to my presentation, but if you need, I can later on paste it to the comment where this video will be available. So if you check the YouTube link for this video, I will paste the full list of references that I have used in today's presentation. So the challenges include, weak signals, definitely learners' difficulty in interpreting, converting the contents of digital materials into simple, self-regulated information, because we do not know how the learners are perceiving these materials, and there can be differences. I mean, there can be one intended message for them, but they can get another kind of message. Sometimes this digital literacy tools are very expensive, and they're also complex to deal with. Uh, Also, we have different comprehension levels among our young learners. I think I typed it again. Typos is there. So we are talking about learner differences. So each learner is different, and different learners have different comprehension levels. Sometimes teachers also lack digital literacy. So that is also another challenge listed by Mudra. So Mudra also adds to her list the access to internet. So many people do not have access to internet because packages are expensive in many countries. For example, in Bangladesh, it is more expensive than in India. You also need expensive digital literacy tools, and definitely some of the materials can be very complex regarding the level of the learner's age and background. So to this list, I would like to add the changes or modification in the versions that we are using. So we know that technological versions change, and sometimes the updated versions are not playable in our old versions. So these are also some changes, some challenges I would like to mention. So then what are we going to do about these things? I mean, I'm towards the end of my presentation. So if you look at this diagram adapted from Jolly and Bolito, we can actually choose the online materials judiciously depending on the identification of need for materials. So we need to find out the needs by doing needs analysis. We have to make a connection between the materials and the context because most of the materials available online are Western in nature. So we have to relate them to our own context. So that's what we mean by contextual realization of materials. Then the pedagogical realization of materials. For example, a fantastic material which is meant for 15 or 20 students now will be used in a class of 100 students. How am I going to deal with that in my Zoom class or Google class? So I need to come up with my pedagogical plan of implementing that material. So number 5 is production of materials, which I want to change because I'm not talking about production of materials. I'm talking about selection of materials. It will be too much to expect from our teachers uh, that they will produce materials suddenly because materials production need a lot of training and experience. But we can manage if we have some ideas and we can choose from the already produced materials available online. Finally, we need to also need to think about how the students are going to use those materials. So when I look at the materials from the teacher's perspective, I will have some sort of understanding, but I also need to look at them from the student's perspective so that I can understand the materials are suitable for them. So this development, I mean, from from level 1 to level 5 or 6, finally, number 6, the evaluation of materials against the agreed objectives. We mean the syllabus objectives. Okay. So this is not a linear process. You can see the dotted arrows. So I mean, there is always coming back, going back and coming forth. Okay. So you have to, when you are in number 4, maybe you need to go to number 3 or number 2, and again you may have to go to number 5 so that you can go through the process of trial and error, and the maximum advantage can be given to the learners. So my argument in this presentation is, in online materials we are basically not before our learners in physically, and this is a kind of obstacle. I mean, many things are missing. For example, in actual classrooms, we often crack jokes. Often learners crack some jokes, which are extremely important for language classes. But in online classes, even if as a teacher I crack some joke, I do not know how the learners are reacting because most of them are in muted mode, and they are not before me. I mean, I cannot see them in the video mode. Most of them are in off video mode. So I really do not know. Even if they are laughing, I do not hear. Okay. So these are the problems. So and at the same time, we know that every learner is different. So we actually do not know how the learners are perceiving the materials that I am displaying using the screen share option. So my argument is that when we choose the materials, uh, we basically choose or try to choose materials which have more characteristics and features of access self materials, or you can also say self access materials. So self access materials and access self materials have some technical differences according to Tomlinson. When self access materials means materials for a particular individual student, access self materials will mean materials which can be used by a group of learners with a similar kind of uh, objective. So this is a technical difference, but they can be used. They can be used uh, almost, in the same sense. So now, what are those features? I mean, when I choose the materials online, I need to see whether these materials have those materials have the features of self-access materials. So let's say the materials that I choose must have exposure to authentic English language. They must facilitate interaction with the text and also interaction between the self and the text. So the materials must have the development of option for development of high level skills. You know that those lots and hots, lower order thinking skills or higher order thinking skills, for example imaging, inferencing, connecting, etc. But well, I mean it depends on which class you are dealing with. If you are taking classes with relatively young learners, then definitely the skill level should not be high, it should be low. Then the materials should also have some mechanism so that the learners can become aware of their actual competence and the equivalent performance of the target language users. So they need to be aware so that they know where they are and where they need to go. So uh, yeah, so the materials that we choose must uh, teach language in a contextual manner. So there should not be any decontextualized teaching of grammatical rules. The learners can also have, their choices regarding the suitability. So there is ample scope or opportunity for group interaction, and there is not just feedback. I mean, your answer is correct or wrong, not like that, but the feedback can be given through commentaries, a series of commentaries, and also a kind of negotiation with the learner. So the negotiation can be both, written and verbal. So there can be discussion and more learner engagement. The the material should train learners about the learning process, activities, and the learning route. So the learner will explore the online materials and learn on their own. So it's a kind of acquisition of the digital devices and the digital way of learning things. And each set of materials must have some follow-up activities at the end, which the learners can do in offline mode as their homework. And maybe when in the next class they come up, they can come up with their understanding and share with their peers and the teacher. So uh, this is also by by Tomlinson. So they also talked about some principles of self access self activities. For example, they must be open ended. Uh, the learners should invest into the materials, okay, so that they have some sort of ownership. It is not my work, the teacher's work, it is also their work, something like that. And we must involve the learners as human beings. It's not like they are simply learners, or we are looking at them like mechanical uh, devices. It's not like that. They are learners, and we have to be sensitive to them. But it is difficult because, as I said, that we are not before them. Each of us is located in different situations, but still we need to know that they are different, and we have to be sensitive to them. Uh, so stimulate left and right brain activities, something which that the creativity and the logic reason divide in the brain. So these things are discussed in the acquisition of first language, but we can relate this to our acquisition of second language and also second language learning online. Finally, the materials must present comprehensible input. That means the material should match with the level of the learners. So we must have that kind of consideration. Okay. So from my personal experience of taking online classes using online materials, I would like to share some of my experiences, and I also like to give some advices. And I think all of you already know many of them, but I'm just putting them or presenting them in a systematic manner. And I would also like to hear from you later on. You have to be really, tricky and smart with technology. And so, for example, you can use saved materials, and you can distribute materials beforehand. Like before today's presentation, I sent my slides to my friends Dipesh and Chevi, so that if there is some power cut issue, they can continue from their end. So you can stay connected using the minimum illustration and color on written materials, because you need high speed network, and this video and colorful materials also need a lot of MB from the students, and the students need to buy the MB. So by using less illustrious materials, you can save them MBs. But if you really want to use them, maybe you can share those things in some cloud computing platforms like Google Drive, something like that, from where they can download when they are within network or free Wi-Fi zone. They can download those materials, go home, and work on them in offline mode. That is what I am saying in number 5. Maybe you can rely more on audio, because audio needs less data than video. So sometimes you can also take screenshots when you are within network coverage, and you go home, or during your leisure time or free time, you can look at those screenshots and learn on your own. Uh, even the teachers can do these things, okay, because it issues, number 7, you see the buffering, connectivity, access, and affordance issues. And finally, you can use online realia. So realia is a term that we use in the case of materials development. But here I'm saying online realia. That means whatever real life materials we have around us. So our own Facebook and Twitter posts, Instagram photos, etc. So if something is relevant and suitable for the particular group of learners I'm teaching, I can bring these authentic elements from the website, from my own platforms, or from the platforms of my learners to the classroom and teach them, because these things are more contemporary and more relevant for them. There are some websites offering open access and graded materials. For example, BBC Learning English.com, or British Council websites or American Center websites. So there are numerous videos and links available in YouTube and other platforms, and we can also use them in a very much informed manner. I mean, the criteria that we have been talking about for last 1 hour. So, I mean, the process of decision making is not easy at all. but it's not that difficult. It's not, as I say sometimes, it's not rocket science. If you are aware, you can do it in a more informed manner and more effective manner. So whatever you do finally can be critically evaluated using the five journalistic W's and H. So you ask before using, during using, and after using all these questions to yourself. So who are the learners? Let's say, what am I using? Then when, where, why am I using them? And how am I going to use them? I mean, what will be the methodology or classroom techniques for using a particular kind of material? So, if you get satisfactory answers to all these journalistic W's and H, I think you will understand, or you'll have a kind of feeling that you have been successful, and that will contribute to enhancing your confidence in using online materials. I would like to end using again the idea from Tomlinson that we need humanization of language learning materials. So it's not like it's a burden for me. I have to take the classes. I choose something and I just give my delivery in time, and it's okay. I did my job. And on the other side, the learners are sitting, and it is their job to understand and catch me, something like that. It's not like that. We have to have a kind of humanistic approach towards learning, learners, and language learning materials. So that we know that it is not my burden, it is my responsibility, and it is not a one-side lecture. It's kind of interaction between me, the learners, and the materials, and outcome is the learners have learned. Okay. Sometimes we also have a tendency to overburden ourselves and our learners with all the new innovations taking place in technology. Let us not do that. Let us know some of the effective ways of exploring online materials, but let us take the maximum advantage, the pedagogical advantage out of those learning materials. Okay. So, for example, I am now taking class using Zoom, but well, I came to know about Microsoft Team. Let me try with my learners. So, let us not try all these things with our learners, because this will also affect them. They need to be cognitively involved, and they will be more interested in understanding technology than in understanding a language or second language. So this is how and where I would like to finish my presentation, and I thank you from the core of my heart for patiently listening to me. Uh, Thanks a lot. I think there can be some questions or answers. I'm appreciate.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Naushaad, Dr. Naushaad, for that very comprehensive and interesting presentation where you took us through the various theoretical aspects of materials production in general, and how you zeroed in on material choice for online teaching learning. And you took us through several tips that useful tips that teachers can actually use, irrespective of what they're teaching and which grade they're teaching, at what level they're teaching. Tips that that would be useful for teachers when they're choosing materials, and also about how the online mode itself is makes teaching learning different, and how we need to cater to that when we choose our materials. Thank you very much. We can now move on to questions if there are any. While we wait for the question, I think there are lots of comments about how informative your presentation was, including many of our teachers and friends from EFLU in Hyderabad. But I would first start off by, offhand, because I don't think there's, yeah, Veena has a question. How do we teach communicative English to students in a large classroom? Because in that case, we would not be involved or communicate with most of the class. That's Veena's question for you, Naushaad.
I think teaching communicatively in large classrooms has been a problem, even when we have been trying this thing in the offline mode. Okay, the issue has not been solved, and the idea of CLT is a fantastic idea, but I am doubtful now whether this idea is relevant for our context. I mean, the Asian context. Okay, because if you survey literature, you will see that CLT failed in all Asian countries except Japan or some you know uh, you know uh, you know what do they call Far East countries. Most of the Asian countries, CLT failed or had a very minimum degree of success. Now, if you come to online modality and if you talk about teaching communicatively, then I can say that it is difficult accepting the limitations of this thing. But there are some ways out. For example, sometimes in Zoom, I try this breakout classroom. Okay, so I divide the classrooms in certain small groups, a group of 6 or 5, which you can determine, and then I stay with one particular group, and I try to become a member of that group and share my views and listen to them, and then I again go to another group. So it is called breakout. In Zoom, you have that option. I do not know about Google Meet or other things, but there are some ways which are satisfactory but not completely perfect.
Yeah. Uh, Naushaad is, I mean, for all of you who know Naushaad, we must know that Naushaad is particularly prone to making statements which people would avoid generally, for being nice and polite. For example, to say communicative English is a failure in Asia, for example, I'm sure he has his data and he can claim why and so on. But I think all of us who practice would see some value in group work and pair work and so on. I'm sure Veena meant that, and I think Naushad has answered that question. While we wait for other questions to come in, Naushad, you referred to the fact that there is the absence when you're teaching online. There is this absence of what Malinowski would term as fatigue communication, stuff like that. That is, you don't get to see. For example, you gave the example of cracking a joke. So you crack a joke and you wait for a response to see whether the students understood it or they enjoyed it or it was of some meaning to them. For example, that is absent when you are in the online mode. You're wondering whether it worked at all in the first place. Whereas when you are face to face inside the classroom, those kinds of feedback works a lot. Work a lot, right? So, in the absence of, this is not with regard to materials per se, but since you mentioned it, I just thought about how do we work around how do we choose our mediums of communicating when we know that these kinds of feedback are not available for us? Would you like to think aloud about those kinds of things?
It's a very difficult question. Okay, I must acknowledge. Uh, there are some alternatives. I mean, you can choose to repair these communicative breakdowns among us in a different way, but you need to train both the learners and the teachers. So, for example, using Google Docs. Okay, so if you are talking about written feedback, uh, which will have less scope for all these affective or emotional aspects of the human interaction in the classroom, but still we can connect in a more focused way. So let's say on the same document we are working. So I choose a particular sentence, and then I write my comments, and then my students reply to that comment. Then some other students also reply and want to know further, and the discussion continues in the review pane. So uh, this is something where we can collaboratively work, and we can do some sort of peer interaction. Sometimes we have to be direct, even though it sounds little rude, but we have to call our students by their names and request them to appear online and make some sort of interaction. So you know whether it is expected or not. That's a different question. But you know that many teachers have their favorite student, and most of the time, these favorite students are those students who understand the teachers pretty quickly. So even in the face-to-face classes, teachers unconsciously look at those favorite faces most often. Trained teachers don't do. Okay, but I say that most often people do like that. So in online classes also, it has been observed that teachers also call those students who they think have a better understanding of their lecture and request them to get into interaction so that other less interested or introverted learners can be enlightened more because they also have questions but they don't feel like interacting. These are some of the ways, but we are still exploring because we are very new into the field.
Yeah. Uh, Another thing that came to my mind while you were talking about the choice of online materials, and you mentioned several sites, including BBC and British Council and so on. And I'm sure there's a wide variety of online materials available. Now, what about the question of the use of these materials? For example, when you source it from an online source and you use it in your classroom, what about the need to acknowledge your source, and what about the issues of copyright and aspects like that? Would you like to touch upon that before we move to the next question?
This is a very important question. Okay, I will answer that, but I think Thiru sir wants to ask a question, which we will take after this. So yes, you know, first of all, there are many open access websites and materials available in online, so you can use them. And sometimes there is a saying, I mean, whatever is online is open. Okay, it's a very casual kind of remark. So whatever is online available is open, you can use it. But I think it is safe to cite them properly. And since you are not using for any commercial purposes, it might not have any, what do we call them, clash or no conflict, conflict of interest with any parties, as long as you are not using them commercially and you are not inappropriately claiming those materials to be your own. You can use them for pedagogical purposes because otherwise, why are those materials meant for? If some particular websites mention that, well, you cannot use these materials without our prior permission. Only in that case you have to ask for their permission. So that's it.
Yeah. Tirusa, I think you have a question. You can unmute yourself.
Sir, unmute.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Naushaad. Mine was more of a worry than a question. We talked about the affective factors. Perhaps we talked about the affective factors with respect to the teachers. I think it is applicable to the students as well. Now, I do not know whether there is any study which would talk about whether these affective factors, reluctance to take to online teaching from the point of view of teachers, is more with the youngsters or with the elderly people, or it is the Westerners or Easterners or Far Easterners. And such a study can perhaps give us some insights into why are they rooted in one's culture, or they individualistic or national, things of that sort. Now, second issue would be what can we do about it? Because I think today, as you pointed out rightly, that online education has come to stay with us. Not that it was not there earlier. Earlier, it was there in a different way. There were lots of sites available on site where people used to go and learn. But today, it has become imperative for us to contact our students only through online. Online education is so very important. And if there are some teachers who are reluctant, they have certain reasons for not feeling comfortable with online teaching. And if there are some students who are also uncomfortable to sit in a class where they don't see the teacher or sit inside a room which they perhaps don't like to sit in. So, what can we do about the situation? Can you think of some solutions? Or can we together think of some
But
solutions?
this, no,
Both
this
of
is
them
a
putting
this is
in a
genuine
difficult corner.
concern, sir. I mean these things have happened in, I think, almost in every context. Okay, it's not that it is happening in the underdeveloped or developing countries like ours here. So yesterday I listened to one professor from York University, Canada, and he also shared about the reluctance of the students and sometimes the teachers to operate at online platforms. So uh, one thing is, there is something called distance education, right? But that's a different thing. The only similarity that we have in distance education and here is that in both the cases, teachers are not taking classes before us, even though in distance education, some classes are taken by them face to face, but in online mode, no classes are taken face to face. But uh, you know that basically to make teachers and learners digitally efficient in being able to take classes online, you need to train them up. And this training needs a lot of time, first of all, for transforming knowledge from the trainer to the teacher, and secondly, for the trainee teachers for inculcating those lessons into them inside their mind and then translating them into their practices. Now it takes ages. So, for example, in Bangladesh, we have been teaching teachers to training teachers to teach communicatively for more than two decades, and still we are not happy with the outcome because they come to the training and they know the thing, but when they get back to the school, they teach in the way they were taught. So it is difficult to change their mindset. Now this is the reality. So even and that's what I said. I talked about the mindset. I added this point to the point mentioned by Tomlinson and Masuhara. So now, if this is the downside of the entire affair, uh, at present, there is also the upside, or the positive side of looking at it from a different perspective. And the dictum, as the dictum says, the necessity of mother of invention. So in many countries, including, for example, in Bangladesh, we didn't have classes for the first 2 months. Even the Dhaka University actually instructed us to start online classes in the month of July. But the pandemic started in Bangladesh in 17th March officially. I mean, we got the first patient identified in 17th March, but we started taking classes in the first week of July. So 3 months we didn't take class because we were thinking how to go about it. And then finally, when the declaration came that we have to take the class, then who taught us actually? Nobody taught us. We taught ourselves. I mean, the situation taught us. Now, whatever, so for example, for me, I watched some YouTube videos, and I also got some ideas from my colleagues in private universities who started earlier than us. Okay, how to operate in Zoom, how to operate in Google Meet, and I taught myself. It's my job. So when the office asks me to do something, I'm bound to learn, but I have to learn that. So yeah, for me, I found that once I learned them, I found, well, they are excellent, in fact, and they are offering me huge opportunities to operate online to make my learning more meaningful and more interactive. Many teachers may not find that, but we have to, you know, go for more awareness raising activities and have to attend the sessions like this, have to organize sessions like this. So definitely I would like to thank uh, SSN College for organizing an event like this and enlightening us, all of us, giving us opportunity to learn. I think I kind of answered
Yes,
your
yes,
question.
you did, you did. We are already at 11:31. We've crossed the time, but quickly, would you like to, Naushad, take up this question? There are three people, Brajesh, Veena, and Danya Varya, who have all referred to assessment during the online teaching process. If you'd like to give us a broad idea, because I think by itself it's a webinar on how to go about assessment in the online teaching process. But if you can just give us a tip or two. Brajesh's question specifically says, throw some light on some of the methods of conducting online evaluation processes. Veena asks, what are your ideas on assessment in the online mode? Detailed feedback is good and works, but workload on the teacher is so high when you have classes of 60 and multiple classes of that kind. Uh, what is the via media? How do you do that? Maybe use lots of MCQs and so on. And Danya's is about assessing primary school children, especially in writing. So, taking those three questions, maybe give a brief, broad outline about assessment, because I don't think you can cover that in a few minutes. And I mean, after that we can wind up. Yeah.
I will start with Dhania's question, and I will actually apologize for my incapacity to comment on the primary education system because I am completely illiterate about, early level of education, techniques and processes there. And assessment is a very serious issue, so I do not want to make any passing comments on that. Well, regarding assessment in general, especially if you think about the secondary or higher secondary levels, I would actually draw your attention to what is happening globally. For example, how this O level, A level exams have been dealt with. Okay, how they have given certificates to their students. So they actually based on the certificates were based on the reports produced from the schools based on the continuous assessment. Now, if we follow that tradition and if we want to relate that to our own system of education, which is known as SSC or HSC, I don't know whether it will be a very valid and reliable way to collect the school reports and convert them into the result cards uh, in the summative assessment form. So that's a challenge. That's a problem. So in our country, very recently, 4 or 5 days back, the government finally decided that they will include the results of JSC and SSC. JSC is Junior School Certificate for class 8. This is a public exam. And SSC is class 10, Secondary School Certificate. So they will combine these two results and they will kind of predict the results of HSC, Higher Secondary Certificate, and give the students the final result card for HSC. And the government is being criticized from different quarters uh, for their decision because you know that subjects don't match. So we have certain subjects in SSC and JSC which we do not have in HSC. Then what are you going to do? And the learner uh, who had a poor performance in the previous exams can always develop in the later exams. But how you understand? I mean, you are going to give the results based on the poor marks which he had previously. So these are the problems. Now, if I come to the continuous assessment, I think one of you has already given the answer. Yes, it has increased our workload to a great extent because we have to check we have to check every comment and write remarks. Okay, on them. It takes a lot of time. So in fact, sometimes 4 or 5 hours on checking scripts and commenting on them. And even when you send them, even then they actually write back and they ask for more comments. But when the office was open, we used to deal with this verbally and through written modality. It's a mixture of both. I mean, we give some comments in written manner. The students come to our office with the comments and ask for more clarification. But now it has increased tremendously. Uh, if you really want to continue assessing them, so you have to customize the assessment practices and make it more subjective. Okay, I mean, objective way of testing is not going to be very reliable because you never know who is going to listen from whom and in what modality, because you cannot ask all the learners to be visually present before you, because they might have their own issues. So you have to give instructions, set rubric, and give the topic, I mean the essay topic or the term paper topic, in such a way that there is much scope for individual reflection, which is bound to be different from other person. So as a teacher, I mean, you have to work more on thinking about project titles and assigning it to students, giving them some time. It's just like we are writing term papers or articles using all the available resources, but it's still the write-up is my own. So we can train our learners to, you know, come up with more academically accepted ways of writing papers at this stage.
Yes.
So that's it. That's all from my side.
Yes, I think that sort of gives us a quick idea about assessment using the online mode. Now, I shall request Professor Thiruvenkadasamy to make his closing remarks before we move on to the word of thanks to conclude this program.
So, good afternoon once again. It was an excellent session. And my thanks to Mian, Naushaad, Kabir from Bangladesh to have shared his experience on online materials. As I pointed out in my introductory remark, it is now the need of the hour. We have no escape from this. At this juncture, the talk definitely opened our minds to lots of related issues. What are the technical glitches possible? How can we safeguard ourselves against them? How we have a choice of platforms to choose from, how an individual teacher can choose that particular platform which will be conducive and relevant to the kind of materials and subject that he is handling. We also talked about the affective filters, and we talked about how it is very important to retain and maintain learner engagement. And certainly, it has started. It started people thinking about many things. I used to think about even in choice of a material. Some of the teachers who I know, in choice of infrastructure, I mean, not materials, the equipment, whether we can do with our mobile phones or whether we can do with our iPads or can do with our computers, laptops. Today, we have thought about all these things in a much deeper fashion, and then we have procured for ourselves a kind of system which will facilitate better transmission of our learning materials and make our own time comfortable in sitting in a place and looking at the monitor and teaching them. I think it's very, very useful talk where teachers across different states and countries have been woken up to several issues relating to online materials. We talked about assessment, and I always felt this assessment in online has opened up a new facility for our becoming more honest. One of the main objections all of us are talking about lack of possibility of assessment is we are distrusting our students and think that they would copy, they would do that, and they would do this. But if our assessment exactly makes them understand where they stand, and that becomes a useful tool for their further education itself, is if an assessment can open up their mind to their educational process, which assessment actually should do, it should have a good backwash effect. I'm sure that they would not copy, and we will be now training our students to be more honest and not be just simply mark oriented through our online platform where we throw them open where they can cheat, but yet they would not cheat because it's going to be beneficial to them. Thank you very much, Naushaad, for this enlightening talk, which has made us think about different issues from materials to assessment to infrastructure to learner characteristics and teacher characteristics. Thank you very much. And on behalf of SSN, uh, I express my sincere appreciation and gratitude to you. We will stay in touch and for mutual benefit, we'll work together with Dhaka and Bangladesh.
Thank you, sir,
Thank you.
for putting the entire talk in perspective. Without wasting much time, let me invite Dr. Cherry Matthew Filippo's colleague to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Deepesh, for inviting me. This was part of our series of lectures hosted by the English Department of SSN College, Engineering, Chennai. And today we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Mian Mohammed Naushaad Kabir, who is a dear friend of us, who shared his thoughts on teaching online, the choosing materials and teaching online. He has touched upon various aspects of it in a very informed way. We are very fortunate to have him here with us. And thank you so much for finding time and being here with us, Dr. Naushaad Kabir. We would also like to thank our college, the management, the principal, as well as the head of the department, the convener of this program, for giving all the support that we need to host such an event. Thank you to my fellow coordinator, Dr. Divya Chandrasekharan, who took the initiative and the lead always, in hosting and formulating such wonderful topics. We also thank all those participants who have joined us from far and wide in this 1.5 hours of talk. We actually exceeded the time. Thank you for your patience and being with us till the end. The video recording of this session will be available on our YouTube channel, so you can watch and share with your colleagues, and we can continue the discussion and the conversation happening through the comments section. Thank you so much.
Yeah, may I also add that the feedback form which is on the chat once you fill it, it would generate a certificate for you. And one of the suggestions that Veena made was for a session that that would deal with using the online mode itself for teaching and assessment. I think we can think about that in a more serious way and try and see we can we can get an expert to talk about that on a subsequent webinar. With that, thank you to all of you for attending. Thank you, Dr. Naushaad, for your informative talk, and thanks to everyone.
I just saw some of my teachers were here. I couldn't follow the comments because I was talking. So very humble gratitude to my teachers and all my friends who have been patiently listening to me, and both namaste and salam and greetings from me. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.